Good evening, friends. Myself, Dr. P. Samuel, Assistant Professor, Department of Biotechnology, Bishop Heber College, Trichy. In this video tutorial, we will be going to see about food poisoning, causes, symptoms, control, and and pathogenesis of foodborne infection. So, with this detail, we will move on to the first slide. What is actually food poisoning? It is known as the foodborne illness caused by consuming contaminated food. What is called contamination? As you all know that contamination is a term used to refer the growth of unwanted bacterial population or unwanted microbial population on the food surface. So ingestion or intake of these kind of food leads to food poisoning. The common terminology used for food poisoning is botulism. It is caused by a bacterium called Clostridium botulinum, a gram positive rod shaped spore forming bacteria. It can be caused by a variety of organisms, right? Not only bacteria, it is even caused by viruses, parasites, and even toxins. If a poisoning or food poisoning is caused by toxin, it is said to be food intoxication. Remember, food poisoning is different from food intoxication, right? And these are all some examples. You could also witness these kind of things in your daily life. It is a growth of mold on the surface of bread, right? This is an example for growth of fungus on cheese pieces. The grape becomes infected, right? Chocolate becomes infected. So these are all few examples. See, food contain variety of nutrients. Those nutrients in turn act as a good substrate for the growth of microorganisms. As a result, the microorganisms are attracted towards the food and they started to grow on the surface. If we eat those contaminated food substances, right, it leads to food poisoning, right? If the food is containing toxins, this condition is said to be food intoxication. Food poisoning is different. In the same way, food intoxication is different. So, what are all the symptoms of food poisoning? Conditions such as foodborne illness is an illness caused by consuming contaminated food. It is caused by a variety of organisms, right? So, this is what we discussed in the previous slide itself. Symptoms such as nausea, diarrhea, abdominal cramps, fever, headache, chills, and fatigue. These are all the primary symptoms of foodborne infection. Once a patient is suspect to have the infection, following are the symptoms may or may not be experienced by the person. Causes. As we discussed in the first slide itself, it is not only caused by bacteria, but it is caused by viruses, even fungi, even the toxins liberated by some microorganisms. Parasites such as Toxoplasma gondii and Trichinella spiralis are also found to associate with the cause of foodborne illness. Is there any measure to control or to prevent the foodborne infection? Yes, of course. We can wash our hands thoroughly. This is the best way to prevent the infection. So, whenever we are going to have the breakfast or lunch or dinner, we should wash our hands at least 20 seconds before and after handling the food and cook the food thoroughly. This is very, very essential because if the temperature favors, the food becomes a suitable substrate for the growth of pathogenic organism. So, we should cook the food properly at proper temperature. Similarly, refrigerate the food promptly. Store food properly in the refrigerator or freezer to prevent the growth of bacteria. We can also take measures to avoid cross contamination, right? How can we achieve this? By keeping raw and cooked food separate, right? We should not mix these two foods in a common place. We should keep the raw food as well as cooked food in a different places. Similarly, when we are purchasing fruits and vegetables from the market, it should be washed thoroughly in running water to prevent the foodborne infection. And if we have spoiled food, it should be discarded promptly. And leftovers, we should not eat the leftover food because it may have the organisms associated with foodborne infection. So, it should be reheat at minimum 74 degree centigrade before eating. Avoid raw or undercooked food, right? Example, meat, poultry, seafood and eggs. So, food should be heated properly. Be careful with seafood because seafood is containing harmful bacteria. Seafood is containing harmful bacteria. For example, even shrimp or fish from the marine origin may have uh, the growth of or may have or may inhabit several toxin producing bacterium. So, we should avoid taking undercooked seafoods, right. So, avoid taking seafoods from uh, the roadside hotels. So, it is very essential. In some cases, the condition may leads to fatal problems, even life threatening problems may also happen. Very simple one, keep the kitchen clean and regularly wash the surface of the vessels with the soap and water, right. Be careful with pets. So, these are also one of the reason or one of the way to control and prevent the foodborne infection. And how the infection spread. So, this is very essential portion. We have reached a very important area. How the infection spread. It is broadly classified into 4 stages. Stage 1 is ingestion of contaminated food. Ingestion is known as eating. This is the common route of nutrition in human beings. We used to take the food by our hand and chew by our mouth and engulf it or swallow it, right. And finally, the food reaches the stomach for digestion. So, this is called the ingestion process. So, the first source of entry is ingestion. So, to avoid it, we should wash our hands clearly, first thing. Second thing is we should eat the properly cooked food, right. We should avoid the intake of raw foods or we should avoid the intake of undercooked foods. So, we should be very careful about it because they may contain microorganisms. Survival, and these organisms are sometimes specialized in the sense they may be having spore related or they may be spore related, right. The spore protect the bacterium from unfavorable condition in the host stomach. It even escape from the acidic environment. So, from the stomach it may enter into the intestine, right. So, this is an example. Let me show you, right. Okay. So, this is an example for bacterial population growing in the intestine of human beings. So, when we eat the raw food or undercooked food, it escapes from the acidic environment due to its protective nature by forming endospore other things. They escaped from the stomach and reaches the intestine where they become colonized, right. So, after colonization, the bacteria will produce toxins. The bacteria will produce toxins. So, these toxins may have secondary effect on the digestive system of human beings. Sometimes it may be lethal. In case of Clostridium botulinum, it produces a toxin, right? It produces a toxin. Even botulinum toxin, even in the case of Vibrio cholerae, it produces a toxin called choleragen, choleragen, right. So, colonization will obviously result in the production of toxins in the intestine. And adherence. So, these favorable environment makes the organism to grow in the small intestine. They used to colonize, and they attach to the surface of intestinal mucosa through the structure called fimbriae. So, note it down, how the bacteria adhere to the surface of the mucosal layer of intestine is through the fimbriae, right. And once it is associated or once it is bound to the intestine, now it started to produce toxins. I told you an example for toxin called choleragen produced by Vibrio cholerae, the causative agent of cholera, right. So, what would happen as a result of these toxins? And it causes diversity of symptoms such as diarrhea, vomiting, abdominal cramps, right, and even sometimes the pathogen invade into the tissue and leads to inflammation and damage the intestine. So, you should understand the 4 stages. So, let me recall the points again. Ingestion of contaminated food and water. So, we should be very careful while handling the food and water. Even we may get several announcements from the government side during the rainy season. We should use water regarding, we have to use water after boiling it properly or after filtering it properly. So, because the food may contain pathogenic organism, they are having the ability to escape even from the acidic environment of stomach, right. And once it is escaped from the stomach and entering into the intestine where they become colonized, they become multiply. So, as a result of multiplication, the population of bacteria will be increased in the intestine. With the help of fimbriae, they bound to the intestinal mucosa. After adherence, they produce toxins. The toxin may elicit different sort of symptoms in the host. For example, diarrhea, vomiting, abdominal cramps, invasion of the tissue, even leads to intestinal damage. So, we should be very careful and we should be very aware of the foodborne infection or foodborne illness. As a result, so if we are aware of it, we can spread awareness to the family members, even to the children's, right, so that they may be escaped from the fatal food poisoning. Hope you are very aware of the concept of food poisoning and how it is being caused by the different organism, what are all the possible preventive measures, and what are all the stages in the spread of the infection, right. Thank you. Stay tuned with me. Bye bye.